Want to use Planemaker, but you don't really know what you're doing to get your views aligned and everything else all looking good for your sim? SESSIM's got you covered. Stick around. Well, good day everyone. Here we are, XP12. In transferring myself across from XP11 into XP12, a few things have worked really well. So bringing libraries across and some of the scenery and so on has worked relatively well. But what didn't work out was the existing airplane models, and I was expecting that to work. So the Cessna 172 G1000 that I was using, which is fundamentally the standard laminar research one, when I bought it into XP12, I had to make some adjustments to it, and I got it to look fine, but what I was noticing was that the whole flight dynamics was different, completely different to what the standard one within XP12 is. So what that led me to believe is that I'm going to have to go back to basics again and reconfigure a whole new copy of the 172 G1000 that the XP12 version is, and get that right so that we can get the flight dynamics to talk to the simulator the way it's supposed to, because the other one was way off. My trim settings were way off and it was just very, very difficult to fly. So I can only imagine that there's some work to be done. Well, there has been some work that's been done. So let me take you now through the steps that I'm going to do, and you can follow along if you like, if you've got your own simulators, because we're about to go into the world of Planemaker and configure or reconfigure a copy of this model and get it set up so we're looking good again. Okay, let's go to Planemaker and have some fun. What do we need to do though before we jump in? Well, you can see what we need to do. We've got to get rid of cockpit bits. We've got all this stuff here we don't need. We don't need these seats that are sitting over here. I don't need to see this compass. I don't need to see the panel. I do need to see a bit more of the cowling, which will be nice. It's not too visible there, so we might just prep that up a little bit. I've obviously got to get everything centered, so a little bit of work to do. We're going to start by stripping bits off the aircraft, and I think we can go from there. Let's get into it. Okay, I'm at the operator station now. Let's get into Planemaker, which is where you do all the work to configure your models of your aircraft within the XP12 directory. So navigate yourselves over to your XP12 directory, and you'll find underneath there is a Planemaker application above your XP12 installer. We'll come to that in a moment. Just need to do one thing before we do jump into Planemaker, and that is make a copy of the aircraft folder that you are going to modify. So for me, we're going to jump up to the aircraft section, laminar research, and I'm going to, as you can see there, this is the default one that you get, 172 SP. This was the one that I actually bought across from XP11, and that's the one that I've been having some trouble with. So I'm going to now start from scratch again and recopy this in its entirety. So I'm going to right click, copy and paste, and you can see it's made a copy there. I'm going to rename this one as new, and this is the one that we're going to play around with. Keep it all capitals, new. Okay, inside of that you're going to see three ACF files, 172 steam gauge, G1000 and the seaplane variant. Okay, and they're the three variants. So obviously whatever we're doing now, we are going to need to do for the other two variants if you're deciding to use those variants. I'll just focus on the G1000 for this exercise. Head back to the root directory and double click on Planemaker. Maximize that to full. So here we are in Planemaker. Now this is a very powerful package, so be very careful in here and please make sure that you are using the copy that you need to do. So let's check that we are using a copy, or if we haven't, we'll open that copy now. So we're going to go up to File, Open, and navigate into that aircraft directory. So it's aircraft, laminar research. Look for the one that I have now created, and look for the ACF files, and I'm going to grab the G1000. Open that, and there it is there. Okay, so at least I know I have the right file open now. And if I look at the bottom, you can see along the bottom there the laminar research 172 new 172 SPG1000 ACF. So I've got the right file. Okay, now what do we need to do? We need to take bits off this aircraft because we don't need to see them anymore. So let's do a first pass taking them off. How do we do that? Well, firstly, I like to use this visualization tool, because if you use this bit here and you can turn things on and off, and you won't actually affect the flight dynamics or the model as such. You're literally just using this for visualization. So let's start turning things off. So the seats, I think we can turn off. Cockpit 1 and cockpit 2, that seems to do some stuff. That seems to take the panel away, but we'll come back to that. Get rid of the pilot, get rid of the cockpit panel, get rid of all these instruments. We don't need to see any of this. Click all that off. Click that off, and again. So we've clicked all those off. The fuselage, that looks too aggressive. It won't take that off. We can leave the gear on. Wings we need to leave on. Glass out and glass in. Let's just leave the glass out and glass in on at the moment, and I think we'll leave the rest of it there. So what I've done is pretty quickly, only because I've done this before, but we need to take off all of those objects. Now there are going to be some others in the glass, but I'm going to show you that in phase 2 when we come back to it. So let's get rid of these first from the actual model file itself. Okay, so you generally remember what they are there. So cockpit 1, 2, the seats, the pilot, all the way through and including the instruments. Let's over to the standard drop down and scroll down to objects. Now here's where it gets interesting. Interestingly enough as well, the big change between XP11's Planemaker and XP12's Planemaker is that you can actually drag this around in XP12, which is really handy because I can sort of move this off down to the side there, and then using the keys, and the explanation of the keys is here, you can move that plane around. So I can literally shift, move this plane. And the reason this is important is because you can actually see things dynamically a bit better when you're doing it. Okay, so now with our plane there, we're going to start taking things away. So here are those objects as we had them in the visualization tool before. You see cockpit 1, cockpit 2, cockpit seats, pilot, cockpit panel, G1000, compass, Hobbs meter, and so on. You can see them all listed there. Okay, we're going to clear the ones that we do not want to see, and so I do that by literally hitting this clear button. Be very careful here. Once you hit clear, it's gone. You can't get it back. You can't undo. Okay, so you would need to go back and refine that object and reset it all again. So this is where I said Planemaker can be pretty unforgiving if you get it wrong, so take your time. So let's clear object 1 or cockpit 1. Make sure we're on there. Cockpit 2 will clear, the seats will clear, the pilot we will clear, the panel, Hobbs meter, Austin bobblehead, airspeed, altimeter, horizon, G1000 screens, and leave that. Fuselage we leave, and we'll leave the rest of them for the time being. Okay, close that down, and look what's happened here. All of those objects have now gone from your main object, so you don't have the option anymore to have a look at those. And if I was to bring this thing back into the middle here and actually zoom in a bit more, and if I just turn the glass off, visually turn the glass off, out, and the inner glass and the reflector, see how the panel's gone, the seats are gone, it's all gone, it's disappeared. So that's good. That means it's now disappeared from the model. So we can visually turn the glass and stuff back on. Okay, so we've turned some objects off. Let's save that file. File, save. And now let's head back into X-Plane and see what that's done visually. Let's go there now. Okay, in XP12 now, and we're going to open the file that we've just edited. So, given that you've made a copy of that file in your Laminar Research folder, the plane itself will come up as a copy in here. And if you have a look, scrolling down through the default aircraft, you can see that I've got multiple copies of the G1000. And the way that you'll identify which one you need is you're simply just going to hover over, I usually hover over the customize area, and you can see the file path that it's looking at. That one there is 172 SP. That's the standard G1000 copy, from Laminar Research. It's not that one. Go to the next one here. This one's come up as new. So that would be the one that we would bet, unless you've given it another name. So you can see the folder there. So that's the one you're going to pick, and you're going to make sure that you've selected the aircraft that you've made the copy of before you start your flight. What I like to do as well is once I've got all mine sorted, is I put them into the favourite. So I actually take the favourite there and stick it up the top so that I've got it always at my disposal. Okay, back into the sim, and you can see that things have started to disappear, and it's starting to come into shape a little bit, albeit there's some tweaking to happen. So firstly, the fuselage general element has gone, which is good, as has the main panel, which is good, and I can see a little bit of a cowling appearing there. But I've got these shapes here, and this is representative of the glass. So I probably want to be getting rid of this next. So it's just leaving me with the wings and the cowling. So we're getting close. So let's do another pass now back into Planemaker, and let's get rid of all these glass outlines and see where we go from there. Let's go. Okay. Back into Planemaker again. This time we need to take some glass away, as we talked about. So there are two settings. There's glass out and glass in. I don't know why. I think that the glass out represents what's actually going to happen to the aircraft from the visual, particularly with rain and so on. So that's what's happened for me anyway. So just believe me when I say leave that one on, but it's the glass in stuff that I want to take off here. Now you're not going to see any changes in this, but you will certainly see it in the sim if we take the glass in off. So there's two there that we want to get rid of. So let's go back into that standard under the Objects tab and look for glass in. Scroll down, and there they are there. There's two of them there. We want to clear those. So let's clear glass in G1000 and glass in reflector, and then close that, and then you can see that they've now disappeared from over there. And we're going to file, save that, and let's jump back into the sim once again and see what that has done. Really starting to get somewhere now. So here we are, we've taken off that glass inner piece, so what we're left with are two wings, albeit they're out of whack, and a cowling with a propeller. So for this purpose of this cockpit, we're getting very, very close to what we actually want to have. So what we need to do now, and this is where the trial and error is going to come in, we need to centralize everything. So let's firstly get and focus on the cowling, because remember before in Planemaker, you can actually move things independently of the other. So I can actually have this cowling centered. I could have the wings up, down, left, right, whatever I want to do. So we want to just get things centralized first. So firstly, even though, I suppose in terms of a visual representation, this is what you're typically going to be, but we have a physical cockpit. We need this to be in the middle. So we need this cowling to move across and be in the middle. Now, this will be pure trial and error. So I'll go back to the Planemaker package now, and I'll show you how we're going to move things, and then come back to the sim and get them in position. Let's have a look. Okay, back into Planemaker. I've now just clicked just to show what I've done here. So standard down to the viewpoint, and as I said before, in this cockpit long arm, so the pilot's viewpoint position, when you've got a physical cockpit, you need to get this centered for what you need. So that's the default numbers, and again, so longitudinal, so that's taking the viewpoint and going along the length of the fuselage, i.e. from where you're looking. You can sit further back, you can sit further forward. Laterally is obviously the one that we're keen on, and obviously vertically. So three planes of movement there, and they were the default positional points, but I'll change them now to what I've actually dialed mine into, and again everyone's will be different, and this is purely trial and error. So what you want to do first is, or what I've certainly done, is I actually looked firstly to get the lateral right, so get that looking centrally, so moving yourself left and right, and then once that was dialed in, you can then come up and down, and then finally look at your vertical, your longitudinal as well. So again, each one of those, your trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, is very time consuming, but once you dial it in, it actually works very, very nicely. Okay, so as we said before, what we want to do first is get ourselves centered. So as you can see, the lateral view, left and right, it's moving. We are 240 millimeters, 0.24 of a meter, off to the side. You would have seen that in the previous footage that we've got there. So what we want is, we want the lateral position to be dead center, okay, to bring everything across. So let's just do that piece first, and let's have a look at what that looks like in the sim. So we'll bring that to 0 and get ourselves centered. Let's do that. Let's save that and see what that looks like. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the plane centered. So really good. All I've done is just shifted it across from its default. Now for me, fortunately, it seems to work okay in this plane, so I probably don't need to do too much to it. But if you're looking straight on now, we've got ourselves perfectly centered on the view, which you would expect if you'd set that viewpoint back to 0. Obviously, we've got a little bit of work to do on the left wing here, and we've got a bit more work to do on the right wing. They're not quite right. They need to be lifted up, or the view needs to be adjusted a little bit, and we may need to make some tweaks to the plane. So what I'll do now is I'll jump back into Planemaker and show you where my views have ended up, or where my viewpoints ended up, because I did make some subtle changes. And this is the trial and error part of it. You will need to go back and forth making some subtle tweaks to your aircraft. Once you line the views up like this, really the next part of it is to make the final adjustments with your wings and so on. You can actually do that in the other area and the objects, and we can show you that a bit later on. Let's go back to Planemaker, and now what I'll do is I'll show you where I've ended up with my viewpoint and what that looks like back in the sim. So what I wanted to show you here was basically what the default positions were for the Cessna, and as you saw, the default lateral position was 240 millimeters off to one side, and that was centralized there. And finally, this is where I got to in my longitudinal, i.e., forward or backwards from the front of the prop, and vertically. And you can see it started at 1.07. I ended up at 840 millimeters, so a little bit further forward, and from 460 millimeters, or 0.46 of a meter, down to 0.43. So just some tweaks on that, and that's where it ended up for me to get the right sort of viewpoint level in all of those three planes. Now over here you've got a number of different sliders, and you've got, if you can see, this is not written the best, but basically what it means is you can move this in 6 degrees of axes movements, so you've got a longitudinal, which is obviously along the length of the fuselage. You've got lateral, which is going left and right, and then you've got vertical, which is coming up and down. That's on the left hand side there. On the right hand side, you can now also do heading, pitch and roll. What that means is that the heading is basically effectively, which I guess more of a about a pivot point, you know, angular movement around, so it's effectively just rotating. Think of that as a rotate. Pitch is where I can, you know, pitch it up and down to rotate the cowling up or down relative, and roll is obviously twisting it, you know, so twisting it that way or that way. So these are bits that you can do once you've got it generally in position. In relation to the objects, and coming back to the objects, now that I had the views lined up, I didn't need to make too many tweaks to the individual positions of each of the points which we'd explained before, which you can independently move longitudinally, laterally and vertically. I made a very slight tweak to the fuselage. As you can see, it's 0.01 of a metre or 100 millimetres, and everything else was pretty much default all the way down. And obviously I'd copied the glass out because I'd moved the fuselage, you know, 100 millimeters. Obviously I took the glass with it, so the glass out went with that as well, but I pretty much kept everything else where it was. Probably could have taken the fuselage gear as well and dropped that back by 100 millimeters. If I just go to the side view and bring that up, we can probably see what that's done. So fuselage gear, if I just go back to where it was. Okay, so that's the default position there. Obviously I've moved the fuselage down, so maybe I'll just take that down with it, and you can see that's just lined up. If you just look at that carefully, you'll see it there. If you see what I tweak it back, see how it's just moved slightly and then bring it back again. So I've just kept that all in line, but everything else I was fairly happy with, and as you can see they're all sort of defaulted back to the zeroed positions. So we can save that. And let's go back into X-Plane, and now that we've got everything lined up, we should have a very nice looking cowling overlooking the, you know, from the panel, overlooking a little bit of the cowling, and then out to the wings. The wings should be nicely aligned. Let's have a look and see what it looks like. Okay, so here we are back in the sim, and as you can see laterally we've got ourselves all centered, which we'd covered on before. Nice little subtle view of the cowling over the, you know, coming through from the panel, and as we move to the left wing, nicely blending in to the side of the shell that I've got here, the physical shell, and same on the right, it blends in as well, and obviously they're both completely centered, and you know, from the, you can't see that from your camera, but it blends up nicely up to the top there, obviously where I've got the glass that would come through. So working really well. Anyway, that's it. Hopefully you'll have some similar experiences yourselves, and it's not too difficult, but as I said, jump in, don't be afraid of it. It is powerful, but as long as you make a copy, you shouldn't go too far wrong. Just make sure you're editing that copy and not the original. Anyway, thanks for watching, and look forward to catching up with you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.